So even though I started with this project, this idea of doing Facebook Lives all the time, I haven't been doing Facebook Lives for a while, and I've been recording most of my videos offline and then choosing to upload them later if I feel like it. And I just had an experience where I was in the middle of the video and the connection dropped and Facebook crashed and rebooted on my phone. So I was like, well, that's a reason not to do Facebook Lives. But it's still a different experience than just talking to the camera. However, just talking to the camera gets better quality videos that I can then upload separately or together. This is kind of interesting. But also part of this project is to tell a story and to tell a story again. And to tell a story again and to tell a story again, and watching how telling stories changes the story. The mood, the moment, and the response. So if I'm talking to Facebook Live and people that I know or people that I don't know start having a text conversation with me while I'm telling a story, that might highlight different parts of the storytelling or distract me in interesting or not interesting ways. So I'm going to start that story that I just told. I'm going to tell it again so that I can save this video and mirror it on YouTube. The internet is so distracting. Hi, how you doing? So I'm in the mountains right now in Northern California because this old friend Robert, Happy Mercury Retrograde Robert the Dutch, I have been traveling around the West for about a month now, just having a wander, although that was not my initial intention, but it seemed to come to be, oh, that's the best way to experience this. Something I used to be very comfortable with, as Robert knows, because he was once a great host for me in the Netherlands. And so right now I'm staying with a friend that I hadn't seen in 5 years, and the last time I saw him was here at his house in Mount Shasta. Not this house, a different place he was living. And we walked up. We drove up to Mount Shasta, and then we walked up through the snow and found a sunny patch and took our clothes off naked in December, up on the mountains. And it was kind of delightful to be naked in the sun and have people walk by us in full ski gear, being like, aren't you cold? And we're like, well, it's not so cold if you're naked in the sun. And so this friend I'm staying with, he was born in 1947. Which is nice. My best friend in New York City was born in 1946. My best friend, who was my home base and father out here in Northern California, who died a couple of years ago, was also born in 1947. I'm going to go stay with a guy in the East Bay soon who's also born in 1947. And I was talking to him on the phone last night, and I said, yes, they don't make men like that anymore. I like the men they made back in the late 40s. They're ripe. They're delicious. And wise. Oh my God. All of our ages and delicious and tastes and desires. So I was talking with him this morning, and a bunch of things crystallized that I wanted to have a conversation with him about. And then I thought he went off to run an errand, and I was like, well, I'll just make a quick Facebook Live video about this because I think it's a useful story, a useful description. A useful meditation. And that's about aging. Maybe I'll tell it from the other angle this time than I started telling it before. As we age, we have ways that we have age disparity. Probably you may have met an older man who surrounds himself with young men and tries to get away with acting like he's a 20-year-old. Probably you've seen that. Maybe you've seen them once they've had face work and tummy tucks. Maybe you are one person or have met a person who have said, well, I look in the mirror, I see this person, that's not how I feel inside. Inside I feel like I'm 18, and I look at this picture and I don't know who that is. I hear people say that a lot in my travels. I hear people say that a lot. Part of my birthday process that I've been doing since I was 23 of celebrating my birthday for however many days I am years that year is really being conscious of my aging. What does it mean to age? What does it feel like? What's it look like? What's it feel like? What's it look like? What's it think like? How does it change? Who is the person? What is the aging? And of course, there's Buddhism. You're no self. You're not the same self from one breath to the next, and constant changing. Clinging to some idea of what we were when we were young, when we first created this identity that we think we're still in. So aging disparity, it's a very common thing that happens to people. And one of the ways that it expresses itself is this idea of what's fun, what's good, what gives us pleasure, what makes us happy. And be it something from rampant sex parties, cruising parks, internet hookups, bars, or eating lots of meat, or drinking lots of alcohol or other drugs. We have these ideas of what's pleasurable, what's pleasant, what's fun, what's good, what's young, what's free. We have these ideas, and as we age, we change. The world around us changes, the products we consume change. And there comes a time that the things that may have been really good for us or seemed good for us at one age is really no longer good for us. And it can come from the simple thing of like you like eating something and then you just don't really like it anymore. If you ever go through periods where you eat like a pint of ice cream every night and then you get to a point where you're like, I don't really want ice cream anymore. And not even from a health standpoint of needing to lose weight or being diabetic, just being like, I've had enough. I don't know, that's something that's happened to me in my life. Seems like a fitting metaphor. However, I've met lots of people who have an idea of what's pleasurable and what's good, be it alcohol or Pepsi or pasta. They gorge on it because they want to be happy, and this is what makes me happy, to eat this, to drink this, to eat this. And then they end up with gout or diabetes, or their body's so big that it's hard for them to move and not pleasant anymore, and yet they don't want to give up the thing that they're consuming in order to free themselves, because they think that what's consuming will make them happy, but they're missing the actuality of how unhappy that it's actually making them. It's something that's disturbed me because I've seen it so many times. People who found out they're diabetic and they're just like, and the doctor, or not the doctors, maybe I would say, maybe a naturopath would say, well, yeah, if you just completely stop eating carbs and you exercise and change your diet, then you won't have to take insulin pills and you won't have diabetes and you'll be fine. And they'll be like, oh, but life isn't worth living if I can't have Pepsi and pasta. And you're like, really? And I've had times in my life where I've believed that life isn't worth living if I can't, have sex and be free or do whatever I want. Oh God, if I had to, whatever. Beliefs about what makes life worth living or not, what's delicious or not, what's fun or not, what's free or not. We cling to these ideas, and as we age, what was once good for us then becomes a poison. What was once happy and fun then becomes toxic. And if we can't stay with what our choices are actually doing to us, we suffer under some decision we made in the past that is just, and again, some people really get into this in the expression of like addiction being 12-step programs like alcoholism or Eaters Anonymous or romance or sex anonymous, sex addiction, stuff like that. And there's different ways of dealing with this. So this friend that I'm staying with, because these are the two main, this is all preamble. This friend that I'm staying with, he was talking about how, I no longer get as hard as I used to. And I love it because, my body's telling me it no longer needs to make children. And I feel like I've got a get out of jail free card. Like I just don't need to be obsessed over sex the way that I once was. And I just have so much more time and energy. And it makes my heart feel so happy to hear that because, I've had friends or even just people that I've met circumstantially who have spent an inordinate amount of time hurting themselves over not being able to be at peace with the changing of their sexuality. And when I say hurting themselves, I mean like taking pills that cause all sorts of problems, taking injections that cause all sorts of problems. I met a fellow who had taken the wrong dose of his injection because the doctor prescribed it wrong. And he got priapism and he was in terrible pain. And then he had to go get his dick drained at a hospital. And then it was this huge swollen, bruised mess. And he was just like, oh. and because I've liked elderly men most of my life. Men in their 40s, men born in the 1940s, whatever, 50s, 60s, they're fine too. But, I've encountered a lot of men who can't get hard. And I enjoy their I love penises, don't get me wrong, but I love the whole body, and your dick can feel just as good not hard as it does hard. And sure, none of us would wish to not be able to get erect anymore, but it's really not a big deal because it's a relatively small part of the body. And I don't know, I enjoy bodies. I've sometimes made the joke that if I am a size queen, it's more about the size of the belly than the penis. Or the shoulders, or the height, or the thighs. I don't know, I definitely like big things, but it doesn't need to be that. Yeah, so just like seeing the way people have hurt themselves, obsessing over trying to cling to an idea of youth. And then there's another thing that I've been witnessing lately in my friends who age. A friend of mine was dying a few years ago. He's dead now. He was dying a few years ago. And the doctor said he had 3 months to live, so he said, I'm not going to do chemo. I have cancer. I have 3 months to live. I'm just going to let myself die. He lasted for 5 years, and in that process, he pulled back. He was forced to. His body could no longer handle the pleasures he was accustomed to. But I saw him retreat from the world in a way that he had never done when we were friends. He went to Europe every year and went to sex parties and was a priest, and so was giving mass and had all these community stuff. And basically he shrunk his world to the church. That's all he could really handle anymore because his body couldn't handle pleasure anymore. And you still get a type of satisfaction from spirituality that has nothing to do with the sensual reception of your body, which is one of the reasons that practicing some kind of spirituality or religion is really important, because as we age, it's always accessible. Eternity is always accessible. Physical pleasure you can only access when you're in a body, and unfortunately you can only access it when you're in a healthy body. There are lots of people who live in chronic pain all the time, and physical pleasure just is not available to them because the overriding sensation they're getting all the time is ow, 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 ow. And some people are totally at peace with that. They take their pain pills or they just suffer through it. Look at Stephen Hawking's. Motherfucker's still doing amazing work, and he's not experiencing a lot of physical pleasure. Anyway. So there's this idea of contraction and aging. And again, this friend I'm staying with, he was talking about being at peace and even grateful for the changing of his biological sexuality. But he's also launching into a whole new chapter of his life that is in continuity with the life he's lived. He's 70 years old, and he's got this new pathway opening up for him that, it's really exciting to him and his community. And it just feels so inspiring just to, be staying with a friend who's like, that's what's happening in his life. Whereas this man who was also born in 1947, same year this fellow I'm staying with, who I met on the internet a few years ago and I've never met in real life, and I'm going to meet him next week, inshallah. Like I can say that in another language and it doesn't feel as silly. It feels freer. Anyway, I'm going to see him next week, and one of the reasons I always wanted to meet him was when I found him on the internet. Like, he wrote books that was very hopeful for this idea of creating a male community of open, integral, authentic sexuality and sensuality and presence. And he teaches workshops and does therapy, one-on-one healing, and he's very sexually integrated. And I was like, wow, how exciting to be with a man like that. And when I talked to him on the phone, he was like, yeah, I don't really lead groups anymore, and I got a Facebook because I just don't really like interacting with people that much, and I don't really see people very much right now. And I was just like, oh. And he just turned 70, and part of the way that felt to him, even though he has has had a very vibrant life, he's just like feeling that it's appropriate to retreat and disseminate. And so he was talking about, I'm getting rid of my furniture, I'm getting rid of my stuff, because, when I die, I don't need to make people go through my stuff. I can do that better, so that when I die, it'll just be easy. And likewise, one of my best friends in the city, who's 71 now, I haven't talked with him about it a lot, because people's life choices are people's life choices, and the energies and the flows of people's lives, you just have to take them in accord. But I've seen him in the last few years make decisions about retreating from life. And be like, yeah, I'm just not going to do that anymore. People often still call me a pup or a boy, or, oh, you're so young. I'm 39 now, which isn't so young, which isn't a pup, which isn't a boy. But I guess I still have an enthusiastic puppy type nature where I'm like, no, don't retreat from life yet. Don't retreat from life yet. But we all have to inhale. We all have to exhale. Every day becomes night, and every night becomes day, and every year has a winter, regardless where on the earth you are. And summer comes again. So it's natural to expand and contract. Like politics. I keep telling people lately, I'm seeing it all like politics. There's summer and there's winter, and some winters are really harsh. And some summers are really harsh. But it's still, just as much as I admire aging gracefully, admire people being in accord with the changing of seasons. Oh, I used to enjoy getting drunk. Now I don't. So I don't. My friend I'm staying with, he said his grandmother would always say, if it makes you happy to be happy, then be happy. When life makes you happy to do a certain thing, that's what you do. And when it no longer does, don't do it anymore. And just as appreciative I am of that grace, I still feel like pain of contraction when I see people choosing to contract, being in accord with their contraction, not moving on to some next great chapter that's in continuity with their whole life. And what do I know? It's just outside perception. And it made me think of all the times when I was traveling when I was a kid. And I would meet these older men and just try to be like, no, don't be old. Be young, be alive. You're such an amazing person. Keep telling your story. Keep sharing yourself. The men I'd meet in the Midwest or even New York. God, the first time I went to New York, I stayed with this older man who, he'd just been like, oh, I just saw all my friends die of AIDS. I don't want to make new friends anymore. It's too painful. It can happen at any age. We can choose to stop living, to wait until we're dead. Teenagers, 70-year-olds. Stories that aren't about conclusions, that aren't about some answer, but just about processing through talking. Processing. So that's why I'm a writer, and that's why I'm a talker, because I experience life through processing it, through expressing it. Which is why I'm a teacher, because I learn from teaching, which is sharing and processing living. So no conclusion, just good morning from Mount Shasta. Feel your aging, feel your contraction, feel your expansion. Be with your wishes, be with your love. Share. Hold your lovers by the hand, be they younger or older. Be their Peter Pan. Help them fly. And when it's time for them, of course, put them to bed and tuck them in so that they rest well.